It is challenging to gather precise information on the number of military fatalities that have occurred since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022, for two reasons. The intensity of the battle on the ground and the tendency of both sides to conceal information in order to maintain good morale, particularly when the war enters a crucial new phase. Because doing so would amount to a confession that Vladimir Putin's fictitious war to denazify Russia's neighbor state is not going as planned and actually represents a monumental miscalculation on the part of his leader, who is already facing pressure at home over the attempted uprising by Wagner Group mercenaries. The Kremlin, in particular, is unlikely to admit to high fatality rates among its troops. When outside figures are presented that suggest considerable Russian losses, Moscow is more inclined to downplay its own, rarely supplied, numbers, placing the official number at approximately 6,000, and blame its opponents of dishonestly reporting against it. On the Ministry of Defense website, Ukraine publishes a daily update that includes a cumulative total of enemy personnel that have been liquidated, in addition to other battle casualties. On August 5, this total was substantially higher at 249,110. Casualties is the standard military euphemism, which allows combatants who have been killed and those who have been injured to be combined, whereas liquidated tends to indicate solely those who have been killed. Foreign observers provide a more detached, albeit still not completely objective, analysis of the situation on the ground, although this evaluation may still be erroneous due to their distance from the realities of life on the front lines. Despite being labeled a foreign agent by the Kremlin, local independent media group Mediazone works hard to provide its own running tally of Russian casualties in Ukraine based on what its journalists can confirm from publicly available information. As of its most recent update on July 28, the tally stands at just 28,652. Although it collaborates with it clarifies that these numbers do not represent the actual death toll, as we can only analyze publicly available data including social media posts by relatives, articles in local media, and declarations by the local authorities. There are actually a lot more people dead. Additionally, it is unknown how many soldiers have been captured or gone missing in action. Another Mediazone collaboration with fellow independent Russian publication Meduza, now compelled to function from Latvia, and Germany's Tübingen University used Russian government statistics to reframe the issue and estimate the overall number of Russian fatalities at nearly 50,000. They used a statistical notion known as excess mortality, which gained popularity during the COVID-19 pandemic, for this count. They calculated how many more men under 50 had passed away than usual between February 2022 and May 2023 using 11 million inheritance records from the National Probate Registry and official mortality data. They found that in 2022, there were 25,000 more males between the ages of 15 and 49 who filed an inheritance case than was anticipated. The number of extra cases skyrocketed to 47,000 by May 27, 2023. The first approach, according to Mediazone editor Dmitry Treshchinin, represents only soldiers whose deaths in each case are verified by multiple sources and whose names we know by heart. Regarding the second, the estimate we did with Meduza allows us to see the hidden deaths that the Russian government is so obsessively and unsuccessfully trying to hide. These figures do not include Ukrainian citizens fighting in the self-declared Donetsk and Luhansk republics or missing Russians who are not officially recognized as deceased. John Kirby, the White House's National Security Council spokesperson, stated on May 1, citing recently declassified information, that the U.S. believed Russia had suffered 100,000 casualties between December 2022 and April 2023, totaling 20,000 deaths and 80,000 injuries, after becoming embroiled in a grinding war of attrition around Bakhmut during the freezing winter. This was one of the most important insights offered so far by Ukraine's allies, watching on. These figures are truly astounding, Mr. Kirby remarked. It's 3 times as many killed in action as the Americans encountered during the Guadalcanal campaign in World War II. That came after Mark Milley, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, estimated the number of Russian casualties in the first 8 months of the conflict to be well over 100,000 before an audience in New York the previous November. The total would be considerably north of 200,000 by this point, largely in agreement with Ukrainian accounting, though the Kremlin has unavoidably questioned American calculations and labeled them as anti-Russian propaganda. If that number is true and is added to Mr. Kirby's update, the US has refrained from publicly estimating the number of Ukrainian casualties, claiming that doing so would reveal confidential military information and put an ally at risk. On the other hand, if the top-secret Pentagon documents that were posted on social media in April are to be believed, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency thought that Ukraine had suffered between 15,500 and 17,500 fatalities and between 109,000 and 113,500 injuries at that point. By the way, according to those records, the agency estimated that between 189,500 and 223,000 Russians had been killed or wounded, including between 35,500 and 43,000 soldiers who had been killed in combat. That agrees with the other figures we have seen thus far. Another estimate came from the head of Norway's defense, Eirik Kristoffersen, who told his nation's TV2 on January 22 that he thought Russia had suffered roughly 180,000 fatalities and injuries, while Ukraine's overall casualties were much fewer, closer to 100,000. The UK Ministry of Defence estimated that between 40,000 and 60,000 Russians had died in the conflict in February. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, regularly publishes updates of its statistics on civilian casualties based on the most recent information from the war area. According to the most current report from the OHCHR, which was released on June 18, 2023, 9,803 civilian deaths and 15,779 injuries have been reported in Ukraine since the invasion started 16 months ago. 7,072 of these deaths and 13,001 injuries took place in Ukrainian-controlled territory. Since the attempted conquest started last year, 2,011 people have died and 2,778 have been injured in Russian-occupied territory. Between June 1 and June 18, 557 civilian casualties in Ukraine were reported, of which 112 were fatalities and 445 were injuries, according to the most recent statistics. Even in this case, the OHCHR notes that due to the inevitable delay in receiving information from the most hotly contested areas, the actual figures are likely to be considerably higher than those it can substantiate, emphasizing how difficult it is to make any firm judgments about the situation in Ukraine.